All right. Welcome, everybody. We are so happy to have you all here. I'm sure we will have a few more folks streaming in over the next few minutes, but we're going to go ahead and get started uh, in part because our presenters are 8 hours ahead of us right now, coming to us from Heidelberg, Germany, where it is 11 p.m., and we don't want to keep them up too late. We are so pleased and honored to have Dr. Angelina Volley here. She is well, let's see, I'll give you her title here in a second. But we don't really have any museum news to go over right now. Things are going well. Hopefully everybody who's here with us in Idaho has been by to see the Body Worlds Animal Inside Out exhibit. If you have not, we urge you to stop by. It is an incredible exhibit, and we are so pleased to be working with the Body Worlds team to bring this world-renowned show here to Eastern Idaho. It is a true honor, and yeah, things are going well. We're happy to have you here. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Dr. Angelina Volley. She is worthy of a good long introduction. I've got 4 paragraphs here, and I'm going to read all of them. So Dr. Angelina Volley started her medical career at Freie Universität in Berlin and completed a doctorate with experimental dissertation on kidney physiology. Correct me if I miss out on anything here, at the University of Heidelberg. She then received her medical license with an intent to be a surgeon, if I understand correctly, right? So she picked up some extra experience working at the University of Heidelberg's Institute of Anatomy and the Institute of Pathology. She did not become a surgeon, however, for a good reason, because she then met Gunther von Hagens, who had developed an anatomical preservation process that he called plastination. And the two married and launched the first Body Worlds exhibit in 1995, with Dr. Volley as the curator and creative designer. And Dr. Volley has now gone on to curate all of Body Worlds' exhibits globally, including Animal Inside Out, which we have showing here at the Museum of Idaho right now. Uh-oh, hope everything's okay over there. And all right. So, and I don't have to tell you that these have been among the most powerful and influential museum exhibits worldwide in the last couple of decades. They are truly groundbreaking, and we are so honored to work with the team, as noted, and to be able to make them available here to the people of Idaho. But since this is not just a museum exhibit, but in fact a scientific advancement as well, Dr. Volley is also the director of the Institute for Plastination in Heidelberg and the director of BioDur, which markets plastination formulas and products to more than 400 medical schools and universities worldwide. She is also the author of several best-selling books and catalogs, producer of a documentary film, and we are so thrilled to have her here to take us behind the scenes at Body Worlds. So, and one little quick note, we are going to uh, recommend that most people stay on mute here throughout the presentation. However, Dr. Volley is happy to receive your questions if at any time they come up, so you are more than welcome to, if we get to a good point, you may unmute yourself and ask the question. You can also type it into the chat, and Ashley and I will take a look at it there, and then we can pose it to Dr. Volley that way. And also one suggestion for the group, Dr. Volley will be sharing her screen using a different software than we usually use, and so you'll probably want to see her full screen. And so if you haven't, there are a couple of Zoom viewing options that you have, and you can go up to the top of your screen if you're on a PC. I think, sorry, on mobile, I think it's at the bottom. But either way, there's actually, you probably don't even have this option on mobile. Anyhow, if you're on a computer, you can go up to the top where it says View, and you'll have a Speaker View and Gallery View. And Gallery View will give you little screens of all of us, but you're going to want to see what's in Dr. Volley's screen. And therefore, we would recommend putting it on Speaker View, and then it will stick right on her when she's the one talking. So I think That is all that I have to say. And so, Dr. Volley, if we are good to go, I will turn the time over to her to take us behind the scenes at Body World.
Jeff, thank you so much for this warm welcome. I'm so sorry that this time I can't be in Idaho. Typically, I'm with the exhibition setup each time the exhibition moves, but these Corona days are just too crazy that I can only talk to you online, but still, that's definitely better than nothing. So, cordial welcome to my presentation. I'm currently in my hometown in Heidelberg. Jeff mentioned before, and this is what Heidelbergs look like. Pretty beautiful, pretty small. It has around 150,000 inhabitants. It's pretty famous for its huge castle that you see up the hill. Also very famous for its university. And while we are speaking, I'm right there. Doesn't work. There should be an arrow popping up right now. This is where I'm currently in and where I'm for you. So, of course, Heidelberg is not only well known for its beauty, but it's also known for its birthplace of plastination, the technology that is behind body worlds. An invention that my husband Gunther von Hagens made in 1977. Actually, he was working back then at Heidelberg University in the anatomy department. It wasn't his intention to become an anatomist at all. And he was involved in a certain scientific project that made him work with some polymers, and it didn't really challenge him quite a bit. And while he was working with these polymers, and when you put all the ingredients of a polymer together and stir that, then you will have air bubbles in that setting. And so you have to de-aerate that. So you put that to a vacuum chamber to get rid of the air. And while he did so and watched all these air bubbles coming out from the polymer bath, he thought, what would happen if I put a specimen there? Wouldn't it impregnate from inside out? And by very chance, he had a little piece of kidney sitting in a volatile solvent like alcohol or acetone. And he just put it in, applied vacuum. And soon after, he had his first piece of plastinated tissue in his hand. And already back then, will revolutionize in the world. Nowadays, we know, of course, he was more than right. But back then, I can tell you that was more than bold, because this first piece of plastinated tissue, it was totally shrunken and almost black. And I guess many of us, including myself, would have just thrown it away, saying it doesn't work. But Gunther was very clever. He absolutely knew that this was dependent on the polymer. He didn't use the right polymer. It did shrink because the polymer had only a very short pot life, so impregnation wasn't long enough. And it turned black because the polymer he used didn't have the right polymer, the right optical properties. So he knew it was just the matter of developing the right polymers. And this is what he actually focused on. Here you can see Gunther in his early years with tons of bottles and different polymer settings. And I can tell you, this is the major focus of plastination research, which even continues until today. If you watch Gunther in his laboratory, you will see him with even more bottles today. So, yeah, this was this very electrifying moment. And by the way, that was his 42nd birthday, the 10th of January, 1977. So he was so obsessed about this idea to make this work. And even though many of his colleagues, including his boss, didn't really like this idea, his boss said, you know, Gunther, it's a nice idea, but it's now time to get back to real research. And but he was so upset that he decided, no, I really want to continue with this idea and I will make this work. But what is plastination actually? Plastination, simply put, is a complicated vacuum process that allows us to impregnate the entire tissue. So each individual cell that contained water beforehand is now filled with the polymer, and that renders the specimen dry. It is odorless, you can literally grasp it, and this definitely makes it to a wonderful teaching aid. But what does it mean in detail? Actually, the first steps that we apply once a corpse or a dead animal comes to our institute is not necessarily related to the plastination process, but it's absolutely mandatory. So the first thing we do when a corpse comes to our institute is a process called formaldehyde fixation. So here you see an image from our laboratories, and you see our staff working on a cadaver. What we typically do is we look for an artery that is close underneath the skin, that is typically in the groin area, as you can see here, or it's in the carotid artery. We insert a little tube, and through this tube we inject about 10 liters or even more of formaldehyde. And the formaldehyde spreads throughout the entire arterial system, and in this way all the tissue gets fixed. That means all the bacteria are killed, but also the protein structures change so that the corpse can no longer decay. And this provides us with all the time we need to anatomically dissect. And that is actually the next step that we follow. Here you can see our staff members working in the dissection class. Dissecting means taking the skin away, the subcutaneous fatty tissue. And here in the right lower corner, you can see a close-up of a dissected area. Normally, all these structures are embedded in fat and connective tissue. So dissection means you take this additional material, this tissue away to unveil all the structures. And only once the specimen is completely dissected and shows all the structures that we want to show, only then the process of plastination starts. I earlier said that plastination is an exchange of tissue water against a polymer. But does a polymer like silicone, for instance, mix with water? Definitely not. So what we have to do is we have to apply an intermediate step that replaces the water with a volatile solvent, for instance, acetone. And this process is called dehydration. Here you can see a dissected body that we put into ice cold acetone, and we'll just leave it to stay. Just because of the chemical gradient, all the water molecules will move out from the specimen, and acetone will move into the specimen as its replacement. This process takes quite a long time, depending on the size and kind of specimens. Mostly for full body specimens, it takes about 4 to 6 months. Once all the tissue water is replaced by the acetone, and you can check that by certain chemical means, Then the next process of plastination starts, and that is forced impregnation, the vacuum impregnation. That's actually the core of the plastination idea. Here you can see the full body specimen, how it is immersed in the silicone bath. And when we apply vacuum, the acetone evaporates very, very easily from the specimens. You see these acetone bubbles right at the surface of the liquid. On the left-hand side, you can also see a little close-up of these bubbles. So the vacuum chamber that we are typically using, they are covered with a glass plate so that we can properly watch the process to also make sure that the process is not too strong, because if you have your vacuum very, very strong, then too much acetone would evaporate. There would too much acetone evaporate at a time, and that would mean the silicone, which is a lot more viscous, could not follow easily enough into the cells. So the vacuum process takes about 4 to 6 weeks, also depending on the kind and size of specimen. And once no bubbles are evaporating anymore, that is the time we can take the specimen out from the vacuum chamber. And this is what you can see in the next image. Here, the full body specimen that we impregnated was, was too fast. Taken out from the silicone bath, and you can see how the silicone is draining from the specimen. It gives you an idea how viscous it is. We leave the specimen in this state for a couple of days to allow all the excess silicone draining off. And then there's another crucial time needed in the plastination process, and that is called positioning. Positioning means we give an overall pose to the body, but also we need to make sure that all anatomical structures are in the right place, because once the specimen is finished, we can no longer change it. And these specimens will certainly hold for a couple of hundreds, if not thousands of years. So we really want to make sure that all structures are really correctly positioned and that the specimen is looking natural, that all the joints are in a natural position. And we do so by means of several aids. Here you can see, particularly in the little close-up in the right corner, we need a lot of needles to fix the structures in place. You could also use foams or strings, whatever helps you to hold the anatomical structures, including the entire body, in place. That can become very, very complicated, particularly if the specimen is of a larger scale. For instance, here in this image, you can see how we positioned a full horse with a rider on top. You can see that we hold the entire figure with huge chains and ropes in place. And it's a lot of workforce involved to really make it an appealing, beautiful, and educational specimen. There's another example that I want to share with you that is a specimen that we managed to finalize not too long ago, and that is a lion that died in a zoo in Germany. Here you can see how the lion was prepared for aldehyde fixation, and nowadays the specimen looks like this, in a pretty dramatic pose, hunting an oryx. But if I show you images from the process, on the left-hand side, you can see the lion, how it looked after it came from the silicone bath. And on the right picture, you can see our first attempt to make it a beautiful image. But there is really a big, big difference from here to there. And I think that might help you to understand how complicated it is, how much work is involved. And it's really a quite artistic work too. The next step, actually, once we have all structures in place, then that's the time we need to cure the specimen. Before we cure, the specimen is still very, very flexible. We can move the joints, we can move muscles, we can still cut by means of scalpels, tissue away. That is still possible before curing. The curing, the curing process depends a little bit on the kind of polymer that we use. If we use, for instance, epoxy resins, that would be cured by means of heat. Polyester copolymer would be cured by means of UVA light. But when we do silicone specimens, and these are the most specimens that we produce, we use a special gas. And that is actually a special invention Gunther did. So you must know it's a full bunch of inventions and development. It's not just the idea of plastination that I tried to explain to you early on. It's really a long, long go and a huge effort in very, very tiny steps. And the curing process for silicone was really one major step. Because Gunther figured out, or let me tell you, that normally you stir the silicone bath with the hardener together, and then you have a pot life. Pot life means the time you have for impregnation is very much limited. And before Gunther had this idea of a gas curing, it was only possible to have pretty small specimens, and only the separation of the curing process and the impregnation process that allowed us to do large specimens, full body specimens, or even animals of the size of a giraffe. So if you go back to the image I showed you before, you can see here two full body specimens that are in the process of gas curing. Gas curing means you need somehow a closed environment where you can inflate the gas. It can be a kind of box, it can be a kind of cupboard that you can close airtight. In this case, because these are so big specimens, we created airtight chambers by means of a transparent foil and just clamped it together. As I said before, there's a full bunch of several developments and inventions. And from my perspective, the gas curing process, that was really the most important one. And he invented the technology in 1977, and gas curing was available from 1982 onwards. But there were other major developments too, just to name a few. To me, it's the development of sheet plastination. So these are very, very thin real slices that show exactly the anatomy as a physician would also see, for instance, in an MRI or CT scan. So he developed this technology in about 1980, 81. Another major development was the preparation of full body specimens. From nowadays perspectives, it seems so close, this idea, but back then it wasn't really the case, because Gunther's colleagues at Heidelberg University said, no, Gunther, don't do a full body specimen. We don't need that. It's so much more handy to have separated organs and separated limbs. You can hand over to the students and they can turn it around. And learning anatomy with a separated part would be a lot easier. But Gunther can be very stubborn, so he just did it. And here you can see the first full body specimen Gunther ever did. That was in 1990. So for teaching anatomy, nowadays we know it's really helping students a lot, but the development of full body specimens was absolutely mandatory for the success of the Body Worlds exhibition. And I will tell you later why. So then that brings up the question, how did we come to the idea of the exhibition at all? Well, when Gunther invented the technology, that was at the time, and even today, and I'm sure it's the same in the United States, anatomy was taking place only in the universities. It was absolutely forbidden for lay people to enter anatomy classes. So it was strictly restricted to the professionals. And there was no hint or experience we had to figure out that there would be a real interest in society. And one day, it was in 1980, we were finally approached by a colleague, a physician. He had studied in Heidelberg, so he knew a little bit about plastination. And back then he was working for a health insurance company in Germany. And he was engaged in certain health education programs. And he said, you know, if I talk to people, they don't understand what I'm talking about. Wouldn't it be possible to borrow some specimens from you? And we liked this idea so much, and we thought, well, what would be needed to give people an idea of their problems, of their body interior? And in the end, we ended up coming up with the idea of an exhibition. Back then, we didn't have full body specimens yet. We even didn't have specimens of all bodily systems. But what I put together already back then was an entire exhibition that showed for each and every organ system certain specimens. And if I didn't have a plastinated, I referred to formaldehyde fixed specimens in a jar. I also once in a while had a plastic model. But the idea was already back then to allow everyone to see firsthand what they are made of. And it was a tremendous success. The exhibition was called The Transparent Human Body. Here you can see an image of that exhibition. Again, we didn't have full body specimens. What I did is, by means of transparent body slices, I put together representative slices of one body, which is where the exhibition got its name from. But it was very unprofessionally displayed. But nonetheless, the exhibition took place in a small town in south of Germany. And back then, the city had around 80,000 inhabitants. And in only 2 weeks, more than 13,000 people came. It was a tremendous success. People were so interested and were asking questions over and over and over. So you could think, well, that was the start of Body Worlds, but no, it wasn't, because back then, coming back to Heidelberg University, there were really very strong discussions going on. Ethical debates going on. We were accused of carrying human remains to the marketplace. How can you do that? So it was so impossible that it was no question we had to stop this idea. Later on, Gunther sometimes asked me, why don't you pick up this idea and continue with the exhibition project? And I said, Gunther, we don't have the money, we don't have the expertise. And in the very end, which museum in the world would ever finance itself? So it's beyond our possibility. So it was very clear we needed to put this idea a shelf. Until 1995, that was a year when the Japanese Anatomical Society had their 100th anniversary. And they planned on that occasion to have a special exhibition at the Tokyo National Science Museum. But what do anatomists show? They have old books, they have old knives, but not really much more to show to the public. So they approached us whether we would be willing to contribute some of our specimens. That was at a time we had already our first full body specimens, and which was even more important back then, we had already a privately organized institute set up, the Institute for Plastination. We had still our positions at Heidelberg University, but aside that, we had our private institute, and that meant to us we are not so much dependent on house politics of Heidelberg University any longer, and that allowed us to participate. The exhibition took place as I said, at the Tokyo National Science Museum. In 1995, here you can see in the upper right corner the front of the museum. And here you see people lining up to get inside the exhibition. It was really amazing. No one really expected such a great interest. But what was even more amazing was to watch people inside, how they reacted, particularly if you keep in mind that the Japanese society is extremely self-controlled. If you deal with Japanese, you hardly have an idea what's going on in their head. But if you look at visitors inside the exhibition, you see they are deep in awe, very ordinary people. They were discussing, they were so moved. And there's particularly one story that I like to share with you, which still makes me goosebumps when I think about it. There was actually a rather young woman, she might have been in her20s, and she started crying. And she finally said, I attempted suicide 3 times in my life. I always felt useless, nothing worse. But now, when I look at this, I feel I have something very wonderful, something very important inside me. And I promise I will never do that again. And latest from that moment onwards, it was so clear to Gunther and me that we have to continue with this idea because it's such a powerful experience to see firsthand what you're made of. We have our bodies with us all our lives, but we never really see and experience what it is, what it means, how fragile it is. And having this experience, it's such a profound experience that people tend to change their behavior. In fact, later on, we did a lot of surveys, and it has shown that around 10% of our visitors said they stopped smoking after visiting the exhibition. Around 25% said they would exercise more, and more than 30% of our visitors said that they would care for healthier food. So it has really a very, very strong impact and provides a complete different view on life. Or how one day the New York Times titled in its newspaper, nothing to say to the camera, but still so much to reveal about being human. Yeah, so we are human anatomists, and we of course mostly focus on producing human specimens, but over the many years, we got donated quite a few animals as well. And so once in a while, I included these animals into our human exhibitions. And I was always fascinated to see how visitors interact and how they were wondering how similar we are underneath our skin. So we remained encouraged to continue plastinating also animal specimens. But it was not only until 2010 that we had such a large collection of beautiful animal specimens together that we decided to have a separate exhibition on animals, which you currently enjoy at the Idaho Falls Museum. The focus of this exhibition is, of course, a little bit different compared to the human exhibition. Our human exhibition is mostly focusing on health messages and how our modern lives affects our bodies, whereas our animal exhibition is designed to make people aware how fragile nature is, and that we are all made of skin, flesh, and bones. We all have the same needs to survive. And if you think of that, you also understand that if we all need oxygen, that we all need energy in terms of food or in terms of oxygen, that we have very similar structures underneath our skins. And that is what Animal Inside Out is conveying. And I do hope, and I'm absolutely sure that it happens, that by getting this fascination, that you really gain a better idea, an appreciation of life in general, and that you start to appreciate all these creatures even more. So where do all our specimens come from? This is one major question that often comes up. And for our human specimens, I can say that they all come from a special body donation program the Institute for Plastination in Heidelberg runs for many, many years, or decades, I need to say. So all specimens we have in our public exhibition are originating from that program, from people who have decided during lifetime to be part of that. And by very purpose, I put this little cartoon there by purpose. We never publish any personal data with our specimens because our donors, they have donated their bodies, but not their lives, not their life stories. And I personally believe that if we would publish personal data with the specimen, then it would take away the power. Because I know by experience, when people walk through the exhibition, they start to think about their own life. They start to identify, they see themselves inside these specimens. But if you put, this was Mr. So-and-so, he passed away at the age of 56 or whatever, it's immediately a different fate. So that is for me one major reason why I also don't like to have personal data with the specimens. And our animal exhibits, of course, they cannot opt in by themselves, but it's very important to us that these animals are never killed or harmed for the purpose of the exhibition. So all our specimens are mostly originating either from zoos or from veterinary programs, and sometimes we also get donated animals from private people. So where does all our work take place? You learned I'm sitting in Heidelberg, and this is also still our headquarters in terms of organizing the exhibitions and organizing the body donation program. But our laboratories are nowadays located in Germany in a place called Guben. You see that in the right image, in the right corner. Guben is right at the German-Polish border. It's pretty far away from Heidelberg. It's around 800 kilometers. We managed more than 10 years ago already to obtain this complex building. It's really huge. I can show you an image from above. It's really almost the entire building structure that you can see there. It does not only hold our laboratories, but the entire ground floor of that building that you can see, that is holding a public area. It's publicly accessible to everyone who is interested in plastination and to see and watch the process, to talk with our staff members. It's called the Plastinarium. And I'll show you a few images from inside. It's really huge. We have a huge collection on display. You can really have in-depth studies of on anatomy. So we have a lot of specialists who visit us to learn anatomy, but also lay people who are just interested in the process. It's really huge. It's more than 30,000 square feet big. And you can get really up close and ask any question that you have. So I guess we are at the end of my presentation, and I'm very happy to take any question that you might have.
Thank you so much, Angelina. Wonderful. Well, I'll go ahead and ask the first question, but be thinking of yours. I'm sure you have some already, and go ahead and unmute yourselves. So the first thing that I'll ask then is that I know that you are passionate about science education and anatomy education in general. And so I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more, because I know there's more to plastination and more to what you do than just the exhibits, certainly. So how else can you use these plastinates?
Well, of course, we do a lot of plastinates for teaching facilities, for universities, also for museums. But organizing the exhibition is a complete different field. And I mean, I'm a physician, and in the very beginning, I came up with a pretty anatomical exhibition, but the longer the exhibition continued, and I listened also to our visitors and figured out what they are interested in. And over the years, I managed to develop certain themes that come along with the anatomical exhibition, because a dead body or the body interior alone is not too interesting for the lay people. They are interested in learning about themselves, so you need to relate to their lives. This is why I, for instance, developed an exhibition on aging that is called The Cycle of Life. Or another exhibition that I really like a lot is about happiness. You may wonder, what does happiness have to do with a Body Worlds exhibition? Well, we can only feel happiness because we have a body. We are a body. Any thought, any experience, any movement, everything that we do or perceive, that is due to certain processes inside our body. And whatever we do or don't do, it has an immediate effect. So no wonder that scientists on happiness, they found out that people who are more happy or more often happy and satisfied with their lives, that they are less prone to diseases, they live longer, they have a better immune system, they are simply better off. So therefore it's a good idea to think about your body and what you can do about your happiness to stay healthy. So health education, that is really my major topic I'm focusing on, and I can get tired to educate people, because it's really amazing to see how people react, how fascinated they are, and to me it's most rewarding when people leave the exhibition saying, I have a complete different view of my inner self, and never again will I take my body for granted. This is what I want to achieve, because only then you can make the proper lifestyle choices.
Go ahead, everybody. If there are any questions, go right ahead.
I have a question. Dr. Whalley, I've seen these blood vessel configurations. How do those actually get made?
That is a pretty good question. Actually, these are a little different to plastinates because in these blood vessel configuration, there's no tissue left. So actually the plastination process didn't take place there. What we do is we applied a different technology, and that is instead of injecting the formaldehyde that I showed you in the beginning, we inject a red polymer into the arteries. It distributes, and while the polymer cures, it takes the shape of the cell, and then we can dissolve the tissue away by means of enzymes or acids or even bacteria. And what's left behind is a cast. And actually, these specimens are my very favorite, not only because they look so beautiful, but to me, they are also the best representative of the human body because they look beautiful and are extremely fragile.
Thank you.
What projects
You are
have
too shy. I'm sorry.
What projects have you got for the future that you're most excited about that you haven't done yet?
If you would ask Gunther right now, he would say a blue whale. That would really be a big challenge because that is the largest animal on Earth. I personally hope this never happens because it would certainly push our limits. The larger an animal or the larger an object is that we plastinate, the more difficult it becomes, and it's extremely expensive. One day we, for instance, managed to plastinate also an elephant. The elephant took us 3 years and around 64,000 working hours. The entire project did cost us around 3 million euro. So it's really, really very costly because it's so time consuming, the process, and so much expert work involved. So yes, please, no blue whale. But of course, we are constantly developing the plastination process further. As I indicated at the very beginning, Gunther is still working on special polymer systems that would ease up the process. It was always Gunther's intention to allow other scientific units, other universities to apply the technology themselves for their own purposes. But as there is acetone involved, and as you may know, it's inflammable, you need a lot of acetone, you need your facilities need to be explosion proofed, you need distillation units, so it's all pretty costly and complicated. And he is still working on a plastination process variation that would come along without acetone. So this would really make big, big difference for other universities. And of course, we are still different. There are always different programs going on. For instance, last year we managed to plastinate a huge heart of a blue whale, a heart of a blue whale. This heart is so big, it's like a small car. And there are so many things that take our attention and which are so exciting. Yeah, also Gunther likes to do little art as well. He loves really his sheet plastination, and one day he had this idea to not only slice biological specimens, animals or human bodies, but also other objects. Like a cup or any kind of machines, and even this included the slice of a tank, a military tank.
And what about plants?
Yes, Gunther tried on plants as well, but plants are pretty difficult to plastinate because they would lose their color. And since the fake flowers are so good nowadays, it doesn't really make sense for us to concentrate on a proper preservation of plants. So we tried, but we felt that it's not really worthwhile for us to continue.
Angelina, I have a question regarding the sliced specimens that you have, and you were talked a little bit about the preservation process, but the slicing process in general, is there, are the specimen frozen to cut the slice, or how do you keep that so intact?
Exactly. The slices that we produce are really very, 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 very thin, and that can only be achieved if the tissue is firm enough. So we deep freeze the corpse or an animal. Gunther did even an elephant slice. So if it's deep frozen, the tissue is firm enough to cut. And then we process in a very similar way as explained before with the silicone specimen, but by means of a different polymer. We process the slices. And what is also special is to have transparency, you need to have a very flat surface. That means you need to cure the slices in between glass plates. It's a different polymer setting. It's pretty complicated. And it's Gunther's favorite plastination technology. I always said he put so much work into it. It took him so long to develop. This is why he loves sheet plastination most. As you may know, Gunther, one day when he will pass away, he wants to be plastinated too. And he often said, I could envision to be plastinated in slices, first because I love the technology so much, but secondly, this would allow him to travel the world post-mortem and to be on many, many different places at the same time.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Wonderful. So we've had another question just come in on the chat here. The question is, have you ever plastinated an obese or very overweight body so people can see fat deposits?
Yes, we have in our human exhibits, we have body slices where you can see really a very, very strong fat distribution, not just underneath the skin, but also inside the abdominal cavities, where you can see all the organs really packed in fat. That's very impressive. Up to now, we didn't manage to come up with a proper idea of dissection in a three-dimensional specimen, because, as I said before, dissection means taking fat and connective tissue away to unveil the muscles and nerves and everything. So yeah, that contradicts the idea of showing the obesity in a three-dimensional specimen, but it's very nicely visible in a slice.
What has most surprised you about things that you've learned during this entire exploration?
Well, my personal work is extremely diverse. In the very beginning, I even worked together with Gunther in the laboratories. That was a lot of fun for me, but for many years, I cannot afford to work in the laboratories any longer because I'm responsible for all our exhibitions and the Institute for Plastination in Heidelberg. So that's more than a full-time job. Yeah, but what is really very unique is the experience to see visitors' reaction. This is most important to me, how it affects people around the world, regardless of age, regardless of religious background, regardless of educational background. to be able to allow such a profound experience, that's extremely rewarding. But I guess your question was what surprised me more, right? What surprised me more? Oh, there are so many things that surprise me every day. But what I didn't really expect with respect to the exhibition is that the visitor reaction is so similar throughout all the pictures. We, wherever we went, people were equally amazed and positively surprised about seeing there and realizing what's inside them. And this is something that I really didn't expect to that extent. I would have thought there is more difference in that is due to their culture. But that was really not the case. And what also surprised us when we started our exhibition, that we very early after we had our exhibition in Japan, we brought the exhibition to Germany. And Germans tend to be very profound. They like to discuss. They are very sincere. We expected some kind of controversial discussion, but there was a very, very harsh discussion going on in Germany. That was surprising too. That was only taking place here, nowhere else. I guess it's really because of German culture. Already the famous philosopher Voltaire said, the Germans, they are very profound. They like to discuss, and behind each problem, there must be a German.
It's fascinating to me that the reaction has been so similar around the world.
Mm.
Yeah, I would not have thought that either. Is there any place in the world that won't take this exhibit?
Well, we have visited quite a few places already. Of course, we haven't visited all places yet. For various reasons, there are a lot of places that don't really make too much sense for us, because we are a privately organized company, and we have to earn money with our exhibits to set up the exhibition, to develop it further, to finance our laboratories, to make the exhibition move, to advertise, and whatever is related to that project, that costs a lot of money. And so we would, unfortunately, although I would really love, we cannot afford to go to countries that are too poor to pay for the entrance. But we went really to very different cultures. We have been to Australia, New Zealand. We toured a lot, quite a bit through Northern America. We have been to South America. We were in, one of our exhibits was just recently teared down in Abu Dhabi. So this was our first country with Muslimic background. We were in Israel, in Turkey. So yeah.
Thank you. Interesting.
We've had a couple of good questions come in on the chat. I'm going to take them in a certain order. Bob, I see yours. We'll get back to that. But we have a question from Christina. She's wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you approach striking a balance between science and art when you design the exhibits.
Actually, it is never our intention to do art with our specimens. We are really, from the bottom of our heart, we are physicians, we are anatomists, and it's extremely important for us to convey the right messages. We never do a specimen just for the look. It always have a very detailed and very fine anatomical dissection. But what we learned from our first exhibition in Japan, you must know, when we had the exhibition in Japan, in Tokyo, we had 4 full body specimens on display, but they weren't designed for public exhibitions. They were designed for teaching anatomy. They were even not able to stand upright on its own. They needed a rack from the rear side. So they looked like an anatomical model. And if there was any complaint, then a few visitors said, it's very interesting, but they look so dead. They are frightening. And that was a moment we understood, yes, when we want to address an audience, people who may come with hesitation, who have never seen a corpse before, not knowing whether they could stand this view. The specimens need to look appealing. They need to be looking beautiful, that you feel inclined to relate to your own lives. And that reminded us immediately of the old Renaissance artists, of the anatomy back then. That was a time when the human body was exalted for its beauty and seen as a window into God's work. When you look at these old images that they left behind, you see very beautiful anatomical bodies, even sometimes put in pictures in a landscape, very naturally posed. And we understood, yes, we have to do the same. We need to position our specimens in a very lifelike and beautiful. Only from that time onwards, we started to position our specimens in the lifelike pose. And over the years, of course, and I showed you early on with the example of the lion, how complicated it is. It's a dead, flappy something that you need to put in the very striking, powerful pose. So that is not something that you do just like that. That's something you need to have to learn and elaborate on. So it really took us a long, long time and a lot of work to figure out how to do it. And over the years, the specimens, of course, got better and better and better and more dramatic. So they may look, at first glance, they may look as pieces of art. But from our perspective, it's not intended, but it's facilitating the learning process because it helps people to approach.
Very good.
And what's also very important for us is to always show the human body as a human body. We would never use human remains, for instance, and turn a lower limb into a golf club or turn a urinary bladder into a vase or something like that. That's absolutely no-go.
So we have a question that came in on the chat as well. Thank you for that. The question is, how much would it cost to plastinate Rod Hansen? And for reference, Rod is he's well over 6 feet tall, probably nearly 2 meters tall in metric.
Well, I mean, this is still human body size, so that's okay. Whether it's 1.80 meters or 2 meters, it doesn't really make a big difference. I think that I explained that it's the plastination process, particularly the anatomical dissection, but later on also the positioning process. That's really time consuming. It takes a lot of hours. On average, we work on one full body specimen 1,500 hours. So that makes the plastination process a little expensive. But just really roughly, a full body may cost around 50 to euros, which is $70,000.
All right, Rod, I think you're safe for now. Good.
Well, from my perspective, it's a huge sum, of course, but if you take into consideration that this is a perfect role model to teach future generations, to teach future physicians, and that these specimens more or less hold forever, that's not really expensive.
Fair point. Do we have any final questions from the audience? We've probably got time for one more.
I do have a question. As far as slicing an elephant, that seems like that would be a lot. What's kind of the process of that, and what's the issues that you can run into with slicing an animal that big?
Well, first and foremost, you need a device that allows you to deep freeze, like a household freeze. You need, don't know what this in Fahrenheit is, minus 70 degrees centigrade. So these freezers, they are pretty expensive. And actually, we have in Guben an entire room, a huge room that equipped with the cooling devices. So for Gunther, it is, how can I say, the exhibition over the many years, they were really extremely successful, also financial wise. But all this money that we generated, that really goes into the development of Plastination. And Gunther is a person who tends to be extremely obsessed. He really loves what he does and doesn't really need to pay off. If he needs a bandsaw that costs 50,000 euro today, yes, he needs it, whether it makes economically sense or not. So to equip a huge hall with cooling devices that would allow you to deep freeze an elephant, this is quite an expenditure. And we have equipped another room. I'm so sorry that I didn't prepare these images, but we have another huge hall, one must say, that is equipped with a high-speed bandsaw. And everything, all equipment that you need is really pretty big. Well, once you have the slices, then you need huge grids to hold the slices in place so that you would not lose any of the anatomical structures. You need tons of acetone, tons of polymers. So that's really a very expensive challenge.
Thank you very much. Well, Dr. Angelina Volley, we are just so grateful for the time that you've taken to spend with us today and to answer our questions. Your work and your husband's work is truly incredible. And I'm going to propose now how we like to end these meetings. If everyone would go ahead and unmute yourselves right now. We are going to, as soon as we get there, offer Dr. Angelina Volley a hearty round of applause.
Yay. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You were such a great audience. Again, I'm so unhappy that I cannot be with you personally, but you never know. You see twice, we say in Germany.
Thank you very much.
We do hope to see you again.
Thank you.
So bye-bye and take care, stay healthy, and enjoy the exhibition if you didn't have the chance to see it. So bye-bye.
Will do. Thank you so much.
Bye.